It is Football in Focus from the Teed Up Indoors on Battleground Avenue. Got Bryant Roche with us from the News and Record. Bryant's in. How about the top 10 this week? The team that got my attention, that top 10, I know Grimsley's there, number 1, Dudley number 2, but the team that's really impressed me so far, and you've got him in there, this Kevin Wallace coached West Forsyth team. Very impressive.
Indeed, I know, you're familiar with him, being, from his Northwest roots. But Wallace, you have to say that he's had one of the best coaching jobs in the Triad so far this season. Of course, you look back at a blowout win against Mount Tabor, which I think really a signature win. Last week, they beat a Parkland team, badly. And that Parkland team, honestly, is a lot better this year than what it's been.
How many touchdowns did they give up to Parkland? I'm trying to remember that score. Was it like 49-6 or something like that?
I've got to go back. I believe it was 50.
It was low scoring, probably, right?
It was low scoring for one team.
Yeah, Parkland, yeah.
West won the game, beg your pardon, 50, I want to say it was like, let's see, real quick. It was over, and it was 56-9 is what it was.
The 9 or the 6 number, yeah.
Yeah.
Under double digits then. That's huge.
Cayman Chaplin ran wild.
And they also beat, did they beat Davie earlier?
No, have not played Davie. They beat Tabor.
Another big impressive win. That's an impressive win, yeah. They've had some impressive wins. The only loss they had was like that Weddington game, right?
Yeah, Weddington, the only loss. Yeah. So far, they started off the season a tight one, 8-7 over AC Reynolds. That was without their running back, though, keep in mind. From there, they got a blocked field goal late to beat Oak Grove, who I think is a pretty good team.
Very good team. Yeah, that's one of those impressive wins there then, yeah.
So they've had a couple really impressive wins, and obviously I think that win over Parkland, don't gloss over that. That Parkland team's a lot better than they used to be.
It's going to be a lot of fun this year when it's going to be East Forsyth, West Forsyth game. That should be huge this year.
I think so. You talk about the last game of the season,
wow.
East versus West.
And West is, so far, so much better looking than they were last year.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I wasn't here last year, but just looking at the films, they played the same first several opponents. And if you compare last year's scores to this year's scores, obviously a flip there for West Forsyth. So definitely a much improved football team.
Impressive for Grimsley. Talked to Mike about this last week. Northwest is the first team to force Grimsley to punt this season, which is almost unheard of the way things go. It's kind of crazy.
That game was really interesting last week. I know you talked to Mr. Fanning before I'm coming on here. Northwest actually outgained Grimsley.
I think it was like 438. It was very close, but they outgained, like you said. I saw your article. I wish I'd have written that first because he jumped. That's a good point you brought up because I saw the same thing. I thought, well, they outgained them, but look at that score.
Really what it came down to, I know Fanning talked about it as well, 3 interceptions, a fumble on a kickoff. Before that happened, actually, the very first possession of the game, for the first time this season, Northwest on a punt play, the snap went over Ballew's head, put Grimsley at the 13-yard line. When I say 13, I mean, the incoming 13. And from there on the very first play, Summers has a 13-yard run. And I mean, it was just an avalanche of things. Northwest, a red zone opportunity. Ballew threw it a little bit behind Trenton Cloud, who is a real good receiver for them. That was an interception. So, for Northwest, just uncharacteristic turnovers. I think, number one, that's something that Grimsley will do to people. And number two, I think if you're Northwest, you hate to lose that game, but I also think, don't take too much into it. I think Northwest is still a good football team.
But think about it too, Ballou being their punter as well as being the quarterback. That's kind of a tough position to be in. I know they'd always used him before in a quick kick situation. He's done that quite a bit over the years, but doing both of those jobs, that's pretty tough, especially against a team like Grimsley. Very tough.
Yeah, it was a little windy.
Yeah.
People thought about, the potential storm. The rain didn't really come until after the game was over, but it was a little bit gusty. Grimsley didn't have the same problems, though. But, yeah, basically, Ballou lined up in the shotgun, not in a regular punt formation, going back. He was in basically a shotgun, alignment.
Right.
And, there were a couple plays where that snap, didn't come in good. So, we'll see if that plays a factor.
I bet you, that may be wrong. I bet you the coaches will probably tell you, too, that the way it happened last week was that's the first time we've had bad snaps like that this year. They would probably tell us that, and it just happens to come sometimes in games like that, the big games, the pressure-packed games.
Yeah, sometimes it is the moment. I don't know if that's what it was, but, uncharacteristic turnovers, and at that point, Grimsley just mounted such a lead that it was too much to overcome.
Kind of lost on some, but this week, Eastern Guilford 4-1 at Rockingham County 4-1. That's a big mid-state 3A game. I think that's a very big game. Some people are kind of losing sight on that one. I think that's an important contest there coming up.
I think it is. Now, tomorrow in the print edition, you will see it ranked pretty high on my slate of games this week. So, I'm in agreement with you there. I'll let my readers wait and see where it's ranked, but I'll just say it's pretty high.
Yeah, looking that over, and you think about the position to get there. Both those teams have had very good seasons so far. Rockingham County is good, and they're kind of a surprise in some ways, too.
I think they've slept on some people a little bit. A pretty good season, only one loss so far, and it was to Reidsville. And keep in mind, Reidsville at that point, they've had some injuries, but at that point, they were in pretty good health, with the exception of Deontay Neal, I guess, being out. But other than that, Reidsville, was in pretty good health at that point. So you think about that, that's their only blemish on the season. Eastern, lost that overtime game, but I think that gave them a little fire.
Little impetus to keep, because they've had back-to-back shutouts since then.
Yeah, they've had some big blowouts since then. So I still like Eastern. I know before I've told you, I've really liked Eastern, but that game, I think for Rockingham, that's a big measuring stick game. That game is something you say, well, are we ready to play against the big boys?
Yeah, because Rockingham County for that game, not only tells them about their season, it tells them about their program, where their program is too.
I really think so. I really do.
Well, rivalry and pageantry, there'll be a big theme at Dudley for Smith at Dudley tomorrow. A lot of rivalry, a lot of pageantry, but could be a tough night for Smith, I think.
I think if you look at what's happened so far this season, that is what people are going to say. Smith will be the underdog. First year for Coach Monis Lash. He cares about this thing, though.
Oh, yeah, he's a former Smith player, so he's got a lot at stake there. He sure does.
He's got a lot of family roots. Yeah. I tell you what, on paper, Dudley looks like a juggernaut that, like you said, on paper they look like too much to handle. I think we'll see if Smith comes out with that, rivalry fire, plays with a little extra something, How
long they can keep that fire burning is going to be the question.
Yeah. And I know you always ask me, so I will answer your question before you ask it.
Shoot it.
I will be at Smith and Dudley this week.
Good call. Good. I didn't know I kind of thought you might be leaning toward the Rockingham County Eastern Guilford game while you're talking. That's good. You'll be at Smith and Dudley. That's a great place to be.
That's where I will be.
The question I'm asking you, too, now, you may not know this answer here before tonight. You may know it tomorrow night when you get there, but didn't see Nasir Newkirk under this numbers for Dudley last week as far as receiving goes. Didn't see him out on the field as far as any catches. So I wonder what happened to him. I know everybody else had plenty of receptions, but still he was not in that lineup from what I could tell last week. So just a little curious about that. They got plenty of weapons as far as that goes. They've got, we know Blackwood, and I think he may call one or two passes, but the top receivers have been Neely, so far this season out that wide receiver, Neely and Bartley, those guys, but didn't see Newkirk last week. Kind of surprised me.
Yeah, I haven't heard a report on that. Just, for the record, I haven't heard yet, about Newkirk, but I have seen that he's had a great season so far.
Certainly.
And you throw in Bartley, who's had 2 punt returns for a touchdown, in recent games, or back-to-back games, I'll say, 1 each. So he's a threat whenever the ball's in his hands. You already talked about Neely and Newkirk.
And one guy they hadn't had to use so far much has been DJ Parker. He's got the same qualities. Hadn't had to use him much at all on offense. He's helped him out, I think, a ton on defense. Yeah.
Really good defensive back.
Yeah.
I really liked his tape before the season started. I believe, I want to verify this, but I think he had 6 interceptions last year. Like I said, don't quote me on that, but I believe. And you throw in Andrew Atmore, who right now is the lead Guilford County passing leader.
Yeah.
And that offense has a bevy of weapons. And for Smith, Javier Branch, defensive end, he's usually kind of their guy they count on for pass rush. I think they're going to really need it this week.
You'll have to go to the track meet this week and try to keep up with Atmore, that's for sure. What about some of these other games? What about Northern Guilford at Southwest Guilford? That's a big game for both those teams. Southwest coming off a win against Western. Before that, they had the loss to Page, and Northern just got their first win of the season against Southeast. So both these teams kind of in the middle of the middle of the metro right now. What about this game as far as Northern now seems like they may have found a bit of a stride, at least a 1-week stride. It was coming in, they were playing good coming in, but again, they found a real stride last week to get that win. So what about this one? What do you think?
Yeah, Northern Guilford, they played a tough schedule to start with. I know they typically, the record they have right now is not something that, the Nighthawk faithful are used to. But like you said, they've bounced back here. And I think, this game, like you said, there are 2 teams that are kind of fighting. They both got, comeback blowout wins this past week. So I think I also kind of circled that one in terms of Guilford County matchups. And Southwest, I've been really impressed with their defense. Oak Grove moved the ball against them in week 1. But being honest, I've really liked Southwest defense, generally speaking. Jalen Carl, I know you've had him on.
Yeah, he was here, sure was.
A really good defensive lineman for them. Last week they also had a punt block for a touchdown against Western. So I really like, what they're doing with Coach Marlon White. And some people know that I've, Marlon White, going back to his good old days in Jacksonville, Florida, covered his team Reebok back in the day.
And they got another kid on that Southwest team last week. I think he had an interception for a touchdown, blocked a punt, and recovered a fumble, and did 3 big things last week, defensive back for them, so he's doing well too. What about this game between Northwest and Page? That could be a big one also. Northwest trying to get on the rebound at that loss, and Page now has got some 2 wins under their belts. So this is a big game for both these teams. This is kind of like the mid-water game for these 2 guys.
Yeah, Page, I know we've talked about Northwest a little bit. Page won a good old-fashioned defensive struggle against Ragsdale this past week. Northwest, I think the most interesting thing is what kind of mentality do they have? Do they have oh shoot, we lost last week, our season's over or whatever, or, we lost the conference title type attitude? Or do they come out, with motivation, some hunger? And Page, I think, the way their season's gone, they have not really been able to play well against good opponents. You talk about Reedsville, Dudley, Mount Tabor. So they got to show people that they can line it up against a really good football team. Because being honest, Ragsdale has not been as good as, some people have thought this year. So
you still see Grimsley and Dudley carrying the flag the deepest for the Guilford County teams come playoff time? That still looks like could be the deal?
I still do. I still have them ranked 1 and 2 in my overall triad rankings. So, that would also mean Guilford. But really, those 2 teams in my mind have been the best two teams in Guilford so far, in my opinion.
What about the top team in the ACC right now? Notre Dame, Duke, Carolina. Who's going to be the top team there, you think?
Oh, gosh. Well, Notre Dame, I guess you put them in that fray, I guess.
Well, yeah, Notre Dame and Duke this week is the game we're looking at. What about Duke, Carolina, Wake Forest, and State, this state top team, and Duke and Notre Dame? Who wins that game?
Oh, man, gosh. I hadn't seen any of them play.
Yeah.
But I'll say out of all those teams, Notre Dame, I guess, barely lost to Ohio State last week, so I'm sure they're pretty good this year.
You have them beaten Duke?
Man, boy, that's an interesting question. That could be a game, actually. Like I said, I really have hardly watched either team. Shout out to Jaquez Moore, though. Covered him at Sewanee, just a little northwest of Jacksonville, Florida. Jaquez Moore, he was a dual threat quarterback in high school, running back for Duke, and I mean, he's a legitimate contributor for them.
So let's go to the pros then. Philadelphia, Miami, and San Fran all unbeaten. Who stays the longest unbeaten among those three? Who lasts the longest?
I haven't taken a peek at what they have scheduling-wise. I think in terms of divisions, I think Miami might be in the best position. Apart, I guess Buffalo is a pretty strong team, but the Jets, suffered the injury to Rodgers, and so I think, you look at Philly, who went to the Super Bowl last year, and I mean, they're a really good all-around team. So, I mean, I'm the most indecisive person you're going to interview.
If you had to toss a coin 3 times there, you think who might go? You go Miami?
Just my gut. Maybe I'll roll Miami just because of, they looked really good last week.
What about your favorite color of car?
My favorite kind of car? Gosh.
Favorite color. Let's go color first, and we'll come back to your favorite.
Oh, my favorite color?
Yeah.
I'm kind of old school. I've got a black car.
Yeah, the black seems to be popular. I saw quite a few of those today.
I'm not that flashy. I'm not as much of an expert as Mr. Fanning, who came on.
Right.
I've never worked in a pit crew.
Right.
I gotta say, in terms of cars, I'm not that picky. I'll ride with what I got, man.
What have you got?
I've got a Dodge Avenger.
Dodge Avenger. That's kind of the sporty look, doesn't it? A little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of a sport car.
Yeah. Well, Bryant Roche with us. Tomorrow night he'll be over at Tarpley Stadium watching Dudley and Smith play, and after the game he'll be interviewing Coach fill in the blank. We'll see what happens after that game is over.
Yeah, probably both. I usually, unless I can't, I try.
I really, for both?
I really try to get both
good.
most of the time.
That's a good thing. And again, you'll be watching a lot of offense, I'm sure, from Dudley, and Smith will be trying to keep the plug inside that little dike there, not let it explode too much, Smith.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where Dudley is the favorite, but when you have a big rivalry like this, the passion comes out, and I think both teams will have energy. I think maybe part of that will be who harnesses that energy, and the other thing is, for Smith, can that energy be enough to compete? Because I don't think that they have a chance if this becomes a track meet game. So they're going to have to slow things down.
Big thing, too, about this committee. You touched on this before we leave. We got to touch on this, the fact that C.J. Neely going up against his former teammates. He's now at Dudley, was at Smith. So that's a big twist in this game, too.
Yeah, that is actually, that is a little factor that I'll give away a little something. That's a little something that I mentioned in, some information for tomorrow. A rivalry like that, I mean, it doesn't hurt to add a little something, right?
A little extra spark, exactly.
Just a little something to the narrative.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. We'll see you somewhere near that game tomorrow night. We'll see you here again next week, hopefully.
Yeah, look forward to it.
A good volleyball piece in the Western Guilford coach, too. Western Guilford coach, you get her last name?
I really appreciate that.
Long? Is it Long?
Yep, it's Coach Diane Long.
I didn't get it, but I did pay some close attention. And then she's on the front of the sports section today. Also, I think you got a little snippet at the top of the main page A, too, talking about it, too, being about her. And she talks about keeping that team the same consistency throughout, win or lose. Stay consistent, she says.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that interview. Coach Diane Long, for those that don't know, has been very successful over at Western over the years. And this year, you know, they lost a couple key players, started off 0-9 against a very difficult schedule, but you go out there and you admire the fight that they have. You know, they've got girls, you know, running outside the lines, diving for balls. So those are the things you like to see. And, you know, after that start, you know, they've really turned it around, you know, with that attitude. And so I think that's something that the Hornets faithful, you like to see, that kind of effort and that kind of drive right now.
Speaking of drive, we're going to get our drive right, our putter out, and hit a few and tee up indoors.
There
Brian,
you
thank
go.
you as always. Good job.
Thank you as always, Mr. Durham.
Next is going to be